writing. All that students had to do on this was help me identify the 5 senses that there were, and then on the back of the sheet we listed different words that would help paint a picture while they're writing. This was by far the most difficult lesson that we have had yet, and the goal was to get 80% or better, and only 6 out of the 11 students did this. What I noticed that they struggled with the most was actually following the directions. On the formatting on the back of the Dig Deeper, many of the students did not follow the directions, and instead of stretching out their thinking and expanding each sentence a little bit more, they ended up writing complete paragraphs instead of just expanding the one sentence. Moving on to the 5th and final lesson, I did what was called a writing brochure. This was a pretty strenuous process because we started from the very beginning of brainstorming and worked our way through creating a paragraph step by step. As a class, we decided that the topic was going to be Halloween. They shared their ideas and then they accumulated different ones that they then highlighted to choose for their 3 details. After this, we took out the writing notebook and they had to stretch out their thinking by writing their 3 details that they had chosen on a piece of notebook paper. Once they had completed that, they had to put a topic sentence and a closing sentence at the beginning and end of their paragraph. Once they had shown me that they had followed all the writing steps, then they were handed a black piece of paper where they had to identify the different parts of the stoplight on the front. Then they were handed a green slip of paper where they had to write down their topic sentence. After they had completed the topic sentence, they were then handed yellow slips of paper to write down all 3 details that they had written down. Then at the very end, they were handed a red slip of paper to write down their closing sentence. After they had completed writing all their work down on the pieces of paper, then they got to glue them into their brochure. After collecting and grading them, it was apparent that all 11 out of 11 students were able to complete a complete paragraph. By the end of the unit, what I saw was a pre-assessment overall gain of 42%, and in the proficient subgroup mean gain score, it was 42%, and as for the instructional subgroup mean gain score, it was actually 0%. The student did stay the same from beginning to end. Following slide is an example of one of the students' work. This is one of the students that actually was gone quite a bit, but this is where she started at and what kind of paragraphs I saw at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of this unit, the student started with a 57%, and by the end, they had gone up to a 78% with a 21% increase, which was huge considering the amount of time that the student had been absent or missing. The next student that I looked at was student F. This student struggled severely with ADHD, and it made a lot of these lessons quite difficult for him. However, the end product that I got, I was super impressed with. When we actually had the time to sit down and work with one-on-one, the piece that he constructed was actually amazing. On the slide, you can see the work that we started with in the top right corner, and then in the left, you can see the writing brochure that we finished with. Overall, the student's pre-score started at 26%, and by the end on his final paragraph, he ended up getting a 78%, which meant he jumped 52% by the end of the unit. The next student that I put in the presentation was student A. Student A was a great student, a hard worker. They were the student who almost all the time had 100% on the work that they did. Looking at their pre-score, they did score 52%, and by the end they did get 100%, scoring the highest out of everybody in the class and going up 48%. The final student that I looked at was student B, and this student had a difficult time working in a classroom. I had been informed that in previous years the student struggled so much that he used to break down when there was loud noises and a lot of distractions. Often during lessons, the student would get so frustrated with work that he would just sit there with his head down and not do it until the end of the day, and then once he had that ability to be put into solitude or he had his alone time to work on it, he would skyrocket, and the work that he did was amazing. In this slide, you can see his final project that he did, and the work was really well done. It was thorough and complete. As for the next part of the project, we were asked to look at evidence-based practices, and the first one that we were asked to discuss was engagement. My favorite engagement strategy that I used throughout pretty much the entire lesson was I do, we do, you do. This seemed to really work well for the students, and every time we practiced it, the students' work seemed to improve. The next question that was asked was, what evidence-based practice do you use effectively to effectively deliver content? The evidence-based practice that I used during this time was scaffolding. A lot of the content that was being taught were very big, so by breaking them down to smaller chunks, the students were able to take it piece by piece and really work through it thoroughly. The next question that was asked was, what evidence-based practice did you use to enhance student success? The evidence-based